Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4145 relating to carry or use of a handgun or deadly weapon. Third reading of the bill.
Questions on passage of the bill? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We discussed this extensively here on the floor on Saturday when the body adopted the Judiciary Committee's Strike and Insert Amendment. House Bill 4145 now, as it's been amended by this committee, or by this body, endeavors to give life to a portion of the rights granted to the citizens of West Virginia, and guaranteed to the citizens of West Virginia by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution and the West Virginia Constitution. This bill essentially allows for people who are 21 years of age or older who are not prohibited by law from possessing a firearm to carry the same concealed. Under current law, they can and absolutely have the right to carry it openly now in West Virginia. This permits concealed carry without a license or permit for people over the age of 21 who are not prohibited by law. The bill preserves the existing permit process for a concealed carry permit, and many people who have them now will want to keep them because it's through the permit process. Actually, the law refers to it as license process. It's through that process by which people have reciprocal rights to carry concealed in other states. The bill creates a new provisional license for people between the ages of 18, they have to be at least 18 years old, and under the age of 21, and that license has reduced cost, but it has the same requirements of training that are in the regular license for people who carry concealed. The bill adopts some uniformity, some requirements of uniformity for the licenses to be issued under the bill. Uniform size of a card, and describes how that's to be done. The bill clarifies an issue that the law enforcement brought to us as we were preparing this. It requires that any training course which underlies one of the licenses issued in a concealed carry license require actual live firing of ammunition by an applicant, and it requires that for such a license the applicant for a license has to submit the instructor's name, signature, and the NRA or state instructor identification number if applicable. Section 4A of the bill is the section that deals with and creates the provisional license, and that reads very much the same as the regular concealed carry license. We pull into the bill Section 7 of Article 7, and it within that defines some new offenses, new felony offenses for anyone who's a prohibited person who carries a concealed weapon, a concealed firearm on his person. Defining felony offenses for that. I know that at least with a few of our members, this bill is controversial. And I think I have to say at this point that I think it should not be. The gentleman from Kanawha made the observation in our committee consideration of this legislation last week that if you think about it, what we have now in West Virginia is a situation where this is legal, this is not. Legal, illegal. It's a policy question, and I support it. The expansion of this right to bear arms is guaranteed to all of us in our Constitution. It would be inappropriate not to mention and discuss what we've seen so many times around the country and around the world, most recently over the weekend, all of us, I'm sure, watched in horror as to what happened in Kalamazoo, Michigan. 6 people shot and killed. I did some research after seeing that, and it was, I have to bring to the attention of the members. The police chief of Detroit, Michigan, made some remarks in December of last year, in which he indicated, these were quoted from the Detroit News, that he thought more armed citizens would help drive down the crime rate. So Michigan, as it turns out, is one of those states, and perhaps the last state in the United States, to have one of those local permit boards with members that restricted the rights of people to have arms or to carry firearms. And it's hard to know. We don't know all the facts of that case. It's hard to know whether or not an armed citizen might have been able to prevent some of that loss of life that occurred in Michigan over the weekend. But it would be my hope, with the passage of this bill, that the arming of law-abiding West Virginia citizens without red tape, without enormous expense, that deters people from seeking licenses, will make us safer. That's the object of this bill. And it must be observed, I believe, that the places in this world where the gun restrictions are the strongest are the places where it is the most dangerous. Baltimore, Maryland has incredible gun restrictions. Chicago, Illinois, very severe and tight gun restrictions. Paris, France. We all watched in horror last year, and I have to wonder, how many of those people, victims of those senseless slaughters, whether it's in a school in Newtown or in Paris, France or in San Bernardino, could have been prevented if there were a person there, a good guy, who was armed and could respond. I think this is good policy. I trust the law-abiding citizens of the state of West Virginia to be responsible with this right. I'd be happy to try to answer questions, Mr. President. Otherwise, urge passage of the bill.
Questions on passage of the bill? Is there discussion? Senator from Jefferson. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator from Morgan yield?
Will the senator yield? Senator yields.
I'm not on finance. I am interested about the live fire component. Is that only for the provisional license for 18 to 21, or is that all concealed carry permits that will be henceforth granted for folks that may be beyond 21 but still want to have reciprocity, so they'll have to go through the process?
It's both, and it's a great question, and I should have mentioned a little more about that. One of the issues that was brought to us by law enforcement was, although the current law says, refers generally to instruction in live fire, there were apparently some instructors who were not deeming that to include actual live firing, but instruction regarding it without firing. And the law enforcement thought, and we agreed, that that should be a component of the training requirement.
To be similar, before you get your automobile license, you got to do a test run with the. Is that correct? You have to get the permit.
So it is a requirement of both the regular license and the provisional license that's created in this bill.
Okay. So the regular licensees that may have already had a concealed carry permit, it may be expiring, they want to renew it, are they subject to the live fire component when they renew?
Not for a renewal.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Now the senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the judiciary chair yield?
Senator yields. Senator yields.
Yes. Thank you. Question is, I believe we all probably believe this bill will pass today, and we may get a chance to vote on it again. But you had mentioned handling weapons in a responsible manner, and that's what I want to talk about today, to make sure that the citizens of West Virginia know that we are handing them, through the passage of this law, a grave responsibility Mr. Chairman, have we, in this bill, are we changing any of the brandishing laws?
The bill does not change the code section that makes brandishing a criminal offense.
Can you, and I don't mean to catch you off guard, can you sort of define at a high-level view what brandishing is?
It's a misdemeanor offense prescribed by Chapter 61 of the Code. It's Article 7. I don't know the exact section number, but it's a misdemeanor offense to brandish a deadly weapon.
Okay. Brandishing means wave it around. What would, for practical sense?
Yeah, and I don't think the section of the code which prohibits and defines as an offense brandishing provides a definition of what brandishing is. It's just its normal, customary meaning.
Sort of in the eyes of the beholder, and of course then virtually a court would define that. We haven't changed any of the laws herein on involuntary manslaughter or...
No, homicides, manslaughter, none of those criminal offenses are addressed within this bill.
Okay.
There are some changes to criminal offenses in this bill.
No, I understand.
And there are 3 new criminal offenses established by this bill. I should mention those a little more specifically, and I appreciate the gentleman's question. There is a new offense for use or presentation of a firearm during the commission of a felony. And so that's defined as a new, separate, and distinct offense from the felony committed to use or present a firearm in the commission of a felony. And then in Section 7, there are 2 new offenses which relate to carrying concealed firearms by persons who are prohibited by law from having firearms.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might, Mr. President. Again, the reason I rise today to talk about that we did not change, other than some added penalties, for crimes that involve a weapon, and I think that was, I support that part of the bill. But we have not changed our basic laws on brandishing. We haven't changed our laws on involuntary manslaughter. These are serious, serious issues. And the Judiciary Chair talked about responsibility. And I know that deep in my heart I realize that all the black shirts you've seen from Citizens Defense League, these are responsible people, I would almost guess without exception, have a concealed weapons permit, and they know that responsibility when they got their license and so forth. But what I want to say today is that we are handing, by passing this bill, a grave responsibility to those that might stick that handgun in their pocket or their pants pocket or beside them on a car seat. Because you may very well end up in a situation that you're going to be in an awful lot of trouble. If you're brandishing or if somehow a confrontation, someone gets shot, the responsibility that comes with the action of this legislature is now handed in every one of the citizens of West Virginia. And I remind everyone how grave that responsibility is for the safety of children, for the safety of themselves, and so forth. So I have no doubt at all, and I don't rise to speak against the bill, but to take this moment in time to highlight the responsibility that those that make the personal decision to carry a gun are taking on a grave responsibility. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
You say
Will
to
the
the
Senator
citizens...
yield?
Sorry,
Senator from Jefferson.
You say to the citizens of West Virginia, don't you mean to any citizen who happens to be in West Virginia of the United States?
Well, I didn't go there, but you're absolutely right.
That's all I wanted to know.
Absolutely right.
Further discussion. The Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to briefly rise in opposition to this bill. And the first thing I'd like to mention is sort of what the senator from Harrison alluded to on Saturday, and that this is not an issue about whether you're for or against the Second Amendment. The current concealed carry process has been endorsed and approved by the U.S. Supreme Court since the 1800s. So the current process we have in place is clearly not violative of the Second Amendment. Secondly, I'd like to say that last year when this bill came up, the proponents of it said, well, the Sheriff's Association just opposes this because they want a bunch of money. They like their money. Well, this year they agreed to just get rid of the fee entirely, and I thought that was a great act of compromise. But that was rejected. And what that means is, I mean, the sheriffs are still going to get their money if we pass this bill, because people will still get the permits. But they still almost uniformly oppose this bill because of the public safety concerns. I think that even about a month ago, there was an article in the paper in Charleston about folks from Detroit who were in Charleston. The police were able to take them off the street because they were carrying concealed weapons without permits, at least for a short period of time, and prevent criminal activity. So I'm going to stand here today and I'm going to stick with our law enforcement who really do not like this bill. I'm going to stick with the majority of my constituents who do not like this bill. I'm going to stick with public safety to support public safety. Now, I know that the people who support this bill are good, law-abiding, respectful citizens, but the people who are going to benefit from this bill are not going to be those kind of people. They're going to be the people who want to come into West Virginia and do harm and do bad things. So today I'm going to stand up, I'm going to stay with our law enforcement officials, and I'm going to vote against this bill.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Junior Senator from the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have the chance to improve the safety of West Virginia citizens, and we have all taken an oath to do so. In my before farming and Senate life, I spent 21 years in the United States Marine Corps. I was an Arabic linguist, a Middle East analyst, and I worked on international terror problems and incidents. I know the mind of terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, ISIS is here in the United States, imported through open borders and homegrown radicalism. Armed citizenry and constitutional carry will help deter terrorism in West Virginia. We have historical data to support my last statement. After the Battle of Concord, William Pitt in the House of Lords urged negotiation with the colonists because of 3 million Whigs with arms in their hands. Pitt's words fell on deaf ears. The American Revolution started, and we know the result. The Nazis avoided neutral Switzerland because of armed citizenry. World War II Navy Commander Menard, years after World War II, recounted his discussions with Japanese World War II veterans and their comments that Japan feared the armed citizens of California, maybe helping stave off an invasion of the mainland. Senators, the modern terrorist threat is real. The lessons of history apply here today in West Virginia. Last November, after the Paris terrorist attacks, Washington, D.C. Chief of Police Kathy Lanier publicly announced citizens will have to take down active gunmen or kill them as the best option for saving lives before the police get there. That's the D.C. Chief of Police. Constitutional carry is a reasonable, common-sense tool for self-defense. It's common sense that constitutional carry will help deter the soldiers of ISIS and terrorism from coming to and acting in West Virginia. This should be a unanimous vote, and I urge passage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote. Senator from Harrison.
Mr. President, I apologize if I got up a bit slow there. I do have to rise today because, you know, I'm a funny guy to stand up, and I'll tell you why. I had my ownership of my first gun at age 6. It was an over and under 410-22. Shot my first squirrel probably that same year. I've owned guns my entire life. Ammunition. I probably have more guns than ammunition, I'd say 99% of you here. Been a member of the NRA since the 80s. I quit when they endorsed George W. Bush, but then I rejoined after our current president won. It's just good political prerogative. And you know, when I joined the Senate, I believe that legislatures should have common sense. And that's all I've asked for in this bill. I'm a Second Amendment proponent. I believed in concealed carry. I still do. But you have to have common sense. We're now going to be the 6th state, if this bill passes, as I fully expect it to allow permitless concealed carry. The majority of those do not allow individuals under the age of 21 to concealed carry. The majority of those do not allow people to consume alcohol in concealed carry. The majority of those states do not allow concealed carry in places that sell alcohol. Several of them, I believe 2 out of the 5, require you to hold your hands up and identify yourself as a concealed carry carrier if you're confronted or speak to law enforcement. If you come into my home, before you enter, one of the states requires you to inform me that you have a concealed carry. And that's the difference between open carry and concealed carry. If you have open carry, I have my right to not allow you in my home. I have a right to walk away from you. I have a right to avoid contact with you because that's my right. That's everybody's right. But with concealed carry, that right's not there. Now, what do those other states have that we don't have? I say it's common sense. I say it's common sense when we passed 5 bills here in the last 2 sessions, giving the Commission on Special Investigations to carry firearms, the Attorney General's investigators to carry firearms, the prosecutors and assistant prosecutors, investigators in every county, the parole officers. We even gave the resort area rangers the right to carry concealed. And you know what? In every one of those bills that passed by a majority in this House, most recently, or pending, or Senate Bill 272 and 102, but in every one of those bills, we require those individuals to take the same handgun training that the state police do. Not an NRA handgun course, but the state police handgun training. We all voted for them. You know what that's called? Common sense. Common sense, because you can't pull a bullet back from the barrel of a gun. Whether it's going towards a bad guy or a good guy, one of your children. More people are killed by their own handguns than anybody kills anybody else with a handgun. To my good friend up in Mon County, military bases do not allow soldiers who are trained in firearms to carry concealed. Now, I'm for this bill. It's a good cause. But there's no common sense in this. That's all I've asked for in this bill. It's clear that even Justice Scalia said we could have common sense when it comes to concealed carry. There's no training. No training. For those of you that don't handle handguns or any type of firearms, training's the key. Training is the key to safety, to not shooting innocent people when you're handling a firearm. My greatest fear, I have 2 great fears. One is that everybody will run out to get their own handgun, put it in their car, never shoot it, never understand how it works, get in a pressure-filled situation where they think they're justified in pulling out their handgun and shoot their wife, shoot their child, shoot their passenger, shoot an innocent bystander. How many times, I've never in my life in 55 years been confronted with an episode where I thought I should pull my concealed weapon. Never. But that's what we're banking on here because we want everybody to be prepared. My second greatest fear is giving 18 to 20-year-olds the right to carry concealed weapons. Now, if you're active law enforcement or military, I can understand that. That's legitimate. But I do not want an 18-year-old to come and pick up my daughter on her first date, and the first thing he shows her is his concealed weapon. Because if he does, somebody's going to suffer a tragedy. And I hope it's not my family. Now, no background check. Carry them where you drink. Carry them where you have alcohol. There's no common sense in that. We could have crafted a common sense, permitless concealed carry bill. People are afraid of voters. I say, let the voters decide what's right or wrong. Some of you are afraid of your own members. I say, let those members go their own way. We needed common sense in this bill. It's lacking here. And unfortunately, I cannot support it when common sense is lacking from our legislation. And I urge members to use their heads, use common sense. Let's come back and craft a good bill next year and pass it. Vote against this one, please.
Further discussion. Senator from Monongalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Folks, today I reluctantly rise to speak to this bill, this piece of legislation. And I had prepared remarks earlier, and I left them in the office intentionally. I felt like it sounded like a bunch of excuses within my arguments. And so I'm just going to shoot from the hip here, and no pun intended. But I, too, am the NRA. I am a firearm collector. There's probably no one in this room more pro-Second Amendment than I am. I profess it on my license plate each and every day. It's 1911A1. And for you folks who understand what that means, that's the very first firearm that was used, pistol firearm, that was used in World War I. It also corresponds with the date, 100 years later, that I entered this body. So it was kind of an anniversary that I was giving an homage to, if you want to call it that. But folks, far too often this session and last session, I've seen legislation where we're trying to fix something that, in my mind, is not broke, and I think that's what we're doing here. Again, I'm just flying by night here. But you know, my eloquent remarks from the Harrison County delegate or senator and Jefferson and Kanawha County are far better than what I'm offering you now, I know. But you know, I have my concerns. I have my concerns, and one scenario I keep playing out in my mind as a father is I have twin sons, as many as you know, and they're 8-year-old. And they're very curious, extremely curious. And I'll share a story that happened just 2 years ago. In my closet at that time, I had an old firearm, didn't work, but I found my son playing with it later on that day. And it's literally scared me. It could have been anything else, but that was the only thing I had in that closet. So within days later, I actually created an 8x8 room in my basement that has my reloading equipment and all the firearms I collect. And mine are rare firearms. They're not just the AR-15s that's so popular right now. They're rare firearms. And I take great pride in them. And if you were to come to my house, I would take you downstairs and show them off. But my sons are very curious, as are all children. And my fear is that you're opening this up so that mom, wherever she may be in the world, or a young person, leaves a gun carelessly someplace that a child could get to it. Mom takes the kids to school and that handgun's in her purse. Nothing wrong with that, but she doesn't have training, perhaps. And that's a fear of mine. And if she leaves it when she comes home, I know time and time again my own personal sons are constantly digging in my wife's purse to get out the cell phone so they can play games on the cell phone. And what if she had a handgun there and she didn't have the training and they removed it and obviously started playing with it? Or in another scenario, maybe 2 years older than that, maybe 11 or 12 years old, and they find the handgun in their mom's purse or their dad's glove compartment, say, you know what, I'm going to take this to school and show it off to the kids at school. Well, folks, there's a lot of scenarios that this bill doesn't address because we're taking out the training. We're taking out the safety. And that's all I'm asking for. If this was a true Second Amendment, I'd be right there with these guys because they're responsible gun owners. I'm a responsible gun owner. The gentleman from Harrison County is a responsible gun owner because we've all had training. And kudos to every one of you who have gone through the training courses. And I would recommend you refresh those every 3 or 4 years. But we're setting into play a situation where we could have blood on our own hands later on, and I can't be party to that. And I hope those members on the other side of the aisle and folks who are listening back home can understand my reasoning. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't planning on standing up and speaking for a second. Senator from Putnam, go ahead and pull that clip off and hand it to me here for just a moment. That's okay. I'm going to borrow your phone for a second. Hey, I've listened to a lot here this morning, and I want everybody to witness something here, especially the pages and all, and the conversation that's been taking place on this. Right now in West Virginia, for a long time, you could carry a gun. It's called open carry. Imagine a cell phone being an open carry. What we're passing here today is a piece of legislation that allows you to do this.
you're a law-abiding citizen in the state of West Virginia, you can do this. You've always been able to do that. The very people that cannot carry a weapon, that are felons, have restraining orders and all the other associated things that go along with it, they can't do what I'm doing right here with a weapon. Nor can they do this. This law doesn't change any of that. The police chief up in Detroit, we've heard a lot of chatter and noise about Detroit. I witnessed over this weekend where he's actually called on the citizens to be carrying guns. There's one thing for certain, and that is where there are gun-free zones, there are more gun violence. And the cities that choose to make it so that you can't have guns, and the more laws that they've got, the more gun violence there is, Mr. President. So I listen to all this chatter in here, especially about common sense. And the fact of the matter is, common sense dictates that when you see it taking place throughout this country, the gun violence, and you can relate it to where there are all these gun laws that prevents the citizens from doing what? Exercising their Second Amendment right. And in the Second Amendment, it says, shall not be infringed. Now, I don't claim to be the smartest guy in the world, but I do know what that means. I absolutely know what that means. Now, let's get to another point on this issue. Law enforcement. I support law enforcement. I think we all do. They're important to our society. They're important to enforcing the laws. But one of the things that they don't do well, and it's because it's impossible because of the common sense of it, is they cannot follow us around and protect us. And that's incumbent upon ourselves whether we choose to have it open carry, concealed carry with a permit, and if we pass this legislation, the opportunity for those to do it without permit, exercising their constitutional rights. In other words, what I'm getting at is I'll take this any day, because law enforcement, when you get into a situation like that, unbeknownst to yourself, they show up in time to put down the chalk marks and the body bag. And that's frankly just a little bit too late for me and the average citizen in West Virginia. I want to at least have a fighting chance to protect myself and my family and even my friends if something would go wrong somewhere. And never will I pull that weapon out unless I was threatened in some way. Make no mistake about it, the NRA supports this legislation. West Virginia Citizens Defense League supports this legislation. And both of them support law enforcement, but above all else, they support the Constitution. I think I've made all the points I need, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not intend to get up and speak today either, but I heard a couple of things that just kind of require me to do so. One was that a common sense approach in this legislation would have been that every law-abiding citizen in the state of West Virginia would have been required to stick their hands in the air every time they got around a law enforcement officer and declare that they were armed, as though being treated like a criminal and acting like a criminal is somehow a common sense approach to this issue. That doesn't make any sense to me. I've heard numerous times, Mr. President, that when the bullet leaves the gun, it can't be recalled back. And I think if there's anything that the people of this state and the people of the United States have learned over the last several years is that when the vote leaves your hand, that also can't be called back. But we would never require training for somebody to go and vote. A vote clearly has immense consequences, can do immense amount of damage. And we would encourage everybody to vote responsibly and to vote knowledgeably, but we know that that's not something that we could reasonably require, and I don't think that we can reasonably require this, particularly when we can look at other states that have no training requirement for their concealed carry permit systems, that even have a permit with no training requirement and no increase in no statistically important increase in the difference between accidental rates and states that do have a training requirement. And finally, I just can't leave this idea that somehow we should look to our military that does not allow our trained soldiers who have had far more training than the average citizen, and we don't allow them to carry on a military base. And all I can think back to is Fort Hood in Texas, where they were not allowed to carry on that base. And I can think to Chattanooga, where they were not allowed to carry. And we can see yet again what a gun-free zone does, even to soldiers, even with extensive training in the use of firearms. Common sense dictates that we pass this bill. The data across the country says that this bill will make not only the citizens of West Virginia safer, it'll make law enforcement in West Virginia safer. I urge the passage of this bill. I urge the fellow members of this body to vote aye.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 24 yeas, 9 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted the affirmative, declare the bill passed.